I'm Megan.
I'm CJ.
And I'm Erica.
And this is the Her Podcast.
Okay, everybody, it's a solo today, and we are diving into the topic of anxiety. What you might not know is that 2/3 of our team have actually been diagnosed with it. And so we thought we'd take the opportunity to chat all things anxiety, what it looked like when they were diagnosed, the tools and tips that they use every single day to help manage their anxiety, and how we as friends and loved ones can actually walk alongside them and be supportive. So this is a really good one. It's super informative. You're going to want to get cozy, relax, turn it up, and take a listen. All right.
Uber.
Well, we randomly had a cancellation today. One of our guests is sick, which is fine. We'll have him up here a different time. So we had to pivot this morning and decide what we were going to talk about. And I kind of pitched the idea. Erica pitched the idea. Me. Don't know if you can tell it's Erica, so I'm going to clarify.
Are you Erica?
About anxiety. Because my two co-hosts have anxiety. If that's the correct way to word that.
Where's my pillow?
So I was like, as someone who has experienced the symptoms of anxiety, and I think a lot of people would identify with that over the last few years. And so I was like, I'm curious to get these girls chatting about it, because I think it's a very hot topic. And I think it's something a lot of people are realizing they have, or again, because the last 2 years, they've been diagnosed. So I'm going to kind of put these two on interview today about their anxiety. They're being very vulnerable with me, so that's great. So I thought I would start off by asking if you can each give me a mini bio on kind of, not like your origin story, but like, what were you like as a kid? And I know the history is that both of you didn't get diagnosed till later. And so I'm curious on what did it look like now as you reflect back as a child with anxiety? What was that like? What did that look like? What did that feel like? What were the experiences you had? And take turns and let's hear your little origin stories.
Megan, how was your childhood? Was it an anxious childhood, friend?
Buckle up.
Buckle up.
Click, 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 click.
Yeah. I think, I'm going to have to speak to what I've been told, because I think my memories of being quite young currently are tied to different events. So I think that anxiety stemmed from my childhood, but it manifested in different ways. And it wasn't until, my parents would say I became a teenager that it really started to show up in different ways, where my mood would turn on I would turn on a dime. I was very moody, per se. I always had a lot going on internally, and didn't have any idea how to manage it. So I would be cool as a cucumber, and then I would erupt. And it would always be over something ridiculous, right? But that was the last straw. And then again, showed up in my 20s, and I didn't understand what it was. And there was kind of a misconception that Megan's moody or whatever. And then in my late 20s, I was diagnosed with anxiety, and everything shifted.
We're at the point of diagnosis with Megan, so I want to go over to CJ and just hear a little bit about what she was like as a kid.
What was I like as a child? What was Black Widow like?
Oh my gosh.
I gotta bring it in. I don't know. I gotta bring some humor to this. About it. I'm just gonna cry this whole episode.
That's okay.
I think that as far back as I can remember, I have felt anxious. So when I think back to my longest memories as a kid, I'm anxiety was present and was there. And so for me, I think that I can't identify something circumstantial in my environment that, quote unquote, I'm using air quotations, caused it, or snowballed it or triggered it. And it's something I've actually always wrestled with is was I just born? Is this my makeup? And I think in my solo episode, I sort of talked about how anxiety, I feel is the thorn in my side, and my burden to bear during this lifetime is how I've just sort of come to understand it. So in my childhood, yes, I definitely had anxiety prevalent. I think that this showed up in physical ways in my body, right? I think that I would get like a nauseous stomach, that I would, sweaty palms, sweaty pits once all that kicked in, like all of those types of things. I think even in elementary, I was always like thinking about what was going to happen at school that day, right? Like who was I going to sit with? Who was I going to hang out with? What were my grades going to be? Like what were the teachers going to say? Was someone going to call on me? Where was I going to sit for lunch? Like was someone going to walk home with me? Like, and I think it was tied to people as well.
So when did you get diagnosed then?
So somewhere between 16, 17, 18.
In there.
Yes.
Okay, so earlier than Megan.
Yes.
So what I'm interested for both of you to tell me, like, what was the catalyst that not caused, but like brought about a diagnosis where you were like, okay, something's going on in here. Like, I'm curious, right? What did that look like for you?
I think no one knew what was going on inside of me. Only I knew what was going on inside of me, but I was having physical panic attacks where I would wake up in the middle of the night screaming as a child. So in the middle of the night, just all of a sudden screaming, I'd wake up. And for me, I would know that it would actually start slow. And so I would usually call my mom's name. So I would wake up in the middle of the night. I would feel uncomfortable. I'd feel extremely anxious, extremely panicky. And so I'd start saying, Mom, 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 Mom. Yeah. And I would just slowly get louder and louder and louder until I was literally screaming at the top of my lungs.
Yeah.
And my parents would always go, how did you scream for that long before we heard you? Because like their bedroom was not that far away. But I like by the time they came to my room, like I was full blown top of my lungs, hyperventilating, screaming, usually my mom's name, for someone to come in and I guess like comfort me or be there with me. And so for me, my parents saw that physically and they were like, something is going on here. And this is consistently happening and we don't know what to do with it. So we went to my doctor and then that's when a conversation started of, okay, like what are other symptoms that you're experiencing? And then through him asking me questions, because I had no idea what anxiety was prior to that and it was not well discussed at that time. He was like, do you think this way? Do you do this? And again, I can't remember off the top of my head the types of questions he was asking. And I was like, yes, I do that. Yes, I act that way. Yes, that's what's going on inside my body. Yes, I have that physical symptom. And he was like, okay, we need to send you to a psychiatrist, psychologist, psychiatrist.
I don't know.
The one who prescribes medication.
Your doctor didn't prescribe?
He, that's again, I should look at my medical records to be honest. I know that I went to a psychiatrist and it was either to follow up with what he had originally given me or to actually put me on something. So I know my doctor made recommendations afterwards and I never went back to that psychiatrist, but I definitely did eventually go to one in the beginning, to get diagnosed with, generalized anxiety disorder, right?
Yep.
GAD.
Okay, are there different kinds of anxiety disorders? Like what do you have that?
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
I would say a lot. I mean, I don't know. I would say yes. There's also similar to CJ, I went to the doctor. There was
But did you see something with you or was it someone else being like, yo, girl, something's going on? Okay.
Both. Okay. And so I was going through something traumatic at that time in my life and everything was very overwhelming and I did not know how to cope. And so I had said, I think I need to go to the doctor. And at that time, my parents had said to like, if, we're so glad you said that because we were basically going to like pack the car and come up and be like, you need to go to the doctor. And so my doctor put me on medication and it's the same medication that I'm still on.
Okay.
And over the years, we've adjusted the doses. And I did go off of it at one point for a little bit. But so I had generalized anxiety. And then after I had my son, I had postpartum anxiety.
Okay. What was the difference for you?
Felt very different to me.
What was that?
I will say like I was like used to my regular anxiety.
Yeah.
As used to it as you can be. So I could very easily like manage my anxiety. I was used to it. I had, you know, certain tools that I could use. I had my medication. And then I got to a place in my life where I thought I'd like to go off of this medication and see what that feels like. So we weaned me off the medication, and I don't remember how long I was off of it. And then I got pregnant. So I was not on medication while I was pregnant. And it would have been, Asher was about 4 or 5 months old. And I just had these like, for me, the difference between the regular anxiety and the postpartum anxiety was like this piece of rage and this like inability to control my reactions or my responses, and everything was just so heightened. And so I remember calling my doctor, and the receptionist answered the phone, and I just started bawling. And she was like, okay, you know what, honey, I'm going to get him to call you within the hour. And you know, I've been there before, and he's going to call you. Okay. So he called me within the hour. He refilled my prescription over the phone, for like pickup, like that day, I think.
Yeah.
And then he put me in touch with a program in the city for women who are experiencing postpartum anxiety and depression, a group program. And then I did an online, it's called onlinetherapyuser.ca, and it's a program out of the University of Regina where it really helps you to kind of start managing your symptoms and speaking with a therapist and all that kind of stuff. So for me, the big difference is the rage piece. And I still experience that. I feel like my anxiety's shifted since I've had my child. Like there's like a new element to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense to me because kids also bring on different feelings even when you don't have anxiety. So I can imagine that when you have anxiety, it could bring on a new symptom. So what was it like for you? Because you both got medicated.
Yep.
Right. Was that like a freeing experience for you? Were you like, oh my gosh, now I'm nothing without my medication? Like, what did that do? Because I know some people really struggle when they have to be medicated, and I'm curious on your take on that.
I think for me at first it was both. Like, it was like, okay, I have the support, but then there's still this like, because there's still this piece of like shame about it. For me anyways. And this was, oh my gosh, 12 years ago, maybe 12-ish years ago. So again, like CJ had said, like at that time when she was diagnosed as well, not a lot of people were still talking about it. Like the conversation has come a long way in the past 10, 15 years, I would say. But you know, I was kind of the first one of anybody that I knew or that would talk about it, going on medication. And so I was just like acutely aware of it. And I maybe made it like part of my identity at the beginning, if that makes sense. And it was kind of like, I think I went into it with the idea of like, I'm going to take this for now. And then when I'm better, I'm going to stop.
Oh yeah.
And I'm still on it.
Right.
Right. So over the years, my journey with it has been very much like, I'm so grateful for my medication. I'm so grateful that it works for me in the way that it does. And it helps my brain do the things it needs to do, in order for me to be healthy. And I just despise the stigma around it. And I'm so glad that more people are openly talking about that they're on medication. Like how many of our guests that we've talked to, you know what I mean? And I think it's so great.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Just like when you got on medication, mentally, how did that make you feel? Were you like, yes, okay, solution? Were you like, ugh, now I'm this person who's like medicated, quote unquote, right? Were you like Megan, who was like, this is like for now and I'm going to go off of it? Like we talked with Leah Tyree, how she went on medication when she got diagnosed with ADHD. And she was like, she went through this period afterwards where when she came off of it, she was like, who am I without it?
Right.
So I'm curious on what that's been like for you.
Yeah, I think that I would have, because the panic attacks are what was the most acute thing that my parents could recognize. So I think that I would have started, again, no one quote me, but I'm like, started with, I don't even know the proper terminology. I literally call it a calm down pill, but I'm like, I would have started with something that brought me down out of those panic attacks so that if something happened, because I left home as soon as I turned 18 after I graduated and went to Australia, and my parents were terrified that they were sending me to the other side of the world with this thing they had just discovered, and they didn't know what was going to happen. And so they literally wrote letters to this school that I was applying to go with. And they were like, you have to be open and tell them what you struggle with. So I had to divulge that I struggled with panic attacks and would wake up in the night screaming and these types of things for my parents to feel comfortable for me to go overseas. And so I feel like at the time I would have consented to having that happen. But that definitely would have felt shameful, I think, in having to just expose yourself and you not fully understanding what's going on inside of you yet.
Yeah.
So I would have started with that medication as a coping tool first. And then I came back from Australia and you just start to learn more about yourself and you've traveled. And I had a very interesting experience in Asia. I think I got like, you're in a completely new world and a new environment. And I know if you've listened to my solo, I talked about that when I was in Taiwan. This time I was in Cambodia and Thailand. And I remember just having these like waves of like, ooh, you know, and I'm like, there's no one around to help me. Not no one around to help me. Like I was with a team, but like your comforts of like your parents or like your bed or your room or your siblings or your friends. I'm like, I have met new people on the other side of the world. I'm in this tiny town. It's hot. It's sweaty. There's bugs. There's weird food, not weird food, but like different food that I'd never experienced. You know, all of these. Like it was very, in every way, sensory overwhelming for me and environmentally overwhelming. So I came home from that experience, both in some way freed because I had made it through. I remember calling, I know we were talking about medication, but I remember calling my parents when I was in Cambodia, specifically on Skype, and I lost it. And I just said, I want to come home. I said, get me on the next flight. Like, get me on the next flight home. I cannot do this. I cannot handle this. This is not going to be okay. And I remember my parents on the other side being like, afterwards I've talked to them about it and they were like heartbroken, you know, like, what do we do for our daughter? Do we fly there? Do we whatever? But they talked me down off this ledge and they were like, CJ, you only have a few more weeks left. Like, breathe. Calm, you know, what are your tools? Who can you talk to? Can we talk to your leader? You know, like open up about that. Like, and I think what it did for me is it took pressure out of the kettle, right? And so I had really built myself up and that helped me to release some pressure. So when I came home from that experience, I was like, okay, there are things going on here outside of just the panic attacks. And so that's when I would have started my medication journey. And I went on a medication. And again, I think I actually played around slightly with like dosages and maybe even a couple ones. I've had a journey where I went on medication for quite a long period of time. And then when I was in the US for school, before I went overseas to Taiwan, to Asia, I decided to take myself off medication with the help of my doctor. And that was a very difficult journey. Megan, I don't know what your experience was like coming off. But I know for me, whenever I didn't take my medication, the best way I can describe it is I feel like I'm being internally electrocuted.
Oh.
So I get these like full body waves.
Yeah, I can't remember, but what I can say is I've forgotten to take my medication like for a few days in a row before. And there was like one very clear memory for me. And it was within the last couple of years. And I was just like, what? Why is everything irritating me? Like, I'm so annoyed. I'm angry. Like, I'm short with everybody. Like, what's wrong with me? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to take my meds today. And then I looked and I was like, I've forgotten to take them for 4 days. Like, that's how quickly it can impact, right?
Yeah.
And when you spoke about sensory overload, and I can't remember if before I did as well and I just wasn't aware of it. That's my first sign that I've got some anxiety that I need to deal with is I get like, I physically, if you're watching this right now, I will like get like a twitch, like I feel a twitch, like I'm uncomfortable in my body when I crawl out of my body. If there's too much noise or like pulling on me or whatever, I get overstimulated and I'm getting better now about voicing that. And my partner can visually see that and knows the cues and stuff now to be like, okay, like, let's just give mom a couple minutes. But it's just like this feel like I just want to crawl out of my body and like shut down all the noise and the lights and the everything in the world. Like, it's so overstimulating, and that's something that for me has increased over the past couple of years.
So do you find yourself then recouping from that? Because sometimes I will recoup into a dark, quiet room.
Yes.
And just need, low, all the things, comfort, cozy, like a weighted blanket now. Blanket. I'm like, no wonder I slept with like 100 blankets when I was little.
Yeah.
Like weighted blankets didn't exist. So I would literally layer my duvets and like all my blankets and crocheted things, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah, it's like immediately I'm like, I need quiet. I need to be alone. I want to lay down. Or like my go-to is sleep. Like I woke up this morning and I was like, I know I need to go to bed at like 8:30 tonight with my weighted blanket alone for like, and to like read a book or something. Like it's just so overwhelming that you just want to, I don't know how else to describe it.
Like my parents and my brother possibly, like, so my family now, I don't know if they'd say this now, I don't want to speak for them if you're listening to this, but they would sort of say, in especially my teenage years, I would come home from school and I would just retreat to my room and I'd shut the door, and they'd say CJ lived behind the door during sort of her teenage years, but I would just be so, in hindsight, overstimulated at school and then come home and need to back out.
Yeah.
Hi friends, Megan here. If you follow along with me on socials, you know I am a huge fan of Poppy Barley and wear their beautiful footwear daily. I started my collection with the classic 2.5 booties, and my obsession only grew from there. Born in Canada, Poppy Barley rethinks every step to create sustainably made, fairly priced products designed to be worn on repeat, and trust me, you will. Not only do they create beautiful, functional, and comfortable footwear, they are a company that cares. Poppy Barley's mission is luxury for the people and planet, and they are a certified B Corporation, meeting the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, transparency, and accountability. Oh, and have I mentioned that they are a woman-owned company? You know we love that. Want to discover Poppy Barley in person? They will be popping up at the Elizabeth Lynn Studio Thursday, March 9th through Sunday, March 12th. Drop by to try on and shop, or you can make an appointment on their website. The shop will be full of shoes and ankle boots for you to try on in sizes 5 through 12. When you find your match, they'll ship the shoes directly to you from their warehouse. Take $25 off your order of $150 or more with code HERPODMARCH in person or at poppybarley.com. Note that it cannot be applied in conjunction with other promotions or sales. Follow and shop Poppy Barley on socials at POPPYBARLEY and at poppybarley.com. We'll link it in the show notes. Happy shopping, friends!
So I'm curious, and tell me if I need to edit this out later. We were just talking yesterday. You were like telling me about how your mom went and did your laundry for you, because CJ is staying with her mom right now. Hi, Auntie Deb. But you were like, you said to me, it felt like a boundary. So CJ's like, my mom, we were away this weekend. I need to give some context. We were away this weekend, and CJ's mom went into like CJ's quote unquote room at her house and like did CJ's laundry. And CJ's like telling me this, and I'm literally like, that sounds awesome. I was like,
she was like,
if my mom would, I would have been like, Mom, did you also do my bedding? Like, I'd be like,
right?
What did you do? I'm like welcoming all of that. And CJ was very like, this was a boundary crossed for me. And I was like, okay, that's fine, respecting that. And then she was like, it brought up things from high school. And so now that you're saying this, I'm like, does it feel like when someone goes into your space that they're like invading your safe space, and you're like, even if I love them?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Because when you said that to me yesterday, I just didn't ask you, because I was like, sometimes when CJ says things like, it brought things up from high school, I'm like, I don't feel like that's like necessarily a space that I'm like, should I ask about that? Or
let's dig around.
I'm like, okay, like this feels like an answer, I'll just leave. But that's interesting, because as you're saying this, I'm like, okay, now I understand why for you would have been like, this is my safe space, this is my like quiet space, and now you just came in and like rummaged all in it, even though obviously Auntie Deb was like, I'm gonna help you do your laundry.
Oh my gosh, she was so kind. Like TMI guys, she was like, she's gonna be underwear this week, she's been here for 3 weeks. She was like, I need to make sure my girl has things to wear. Her heart was so sweet. Yes. right? But even now, like in my living situation, I still need, like as an adult, one of my coping tools is still to have a safe space where other people do not enter into unless they've been invited. And it tends to be my bedroom, and it tends to be my bed, you know, because that's just somewhere, because again, rest is important to me, like a weighted blanket, being able to lay down, being able to like close my eyes, right? And so I found that as, I should start coining it something fun, you know, like my oasis.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
Yeah,
Where
I
recharge.
totally understand having that space that's yours. For in our living situation, there was a long period of time where I didn't have that, and now I feel like I do again, and that's such a comfort, you know, to be able to have a space that you feel really comfortable in and belong to.
Well, it's like hard to go out into the world when you don't have, you know, and I'm working on cultivating that safety in and of, like, inside of myself, something that I can take with me, you know, no matter where I go, rather than it just being like one place or circumstantial.
Yeah.
I also find a lot of comfort from my husband, which Erica will know. Sometimes when I am out in Saskatchewan for a while, she's like, do you want to bring Ben with? And I'm like,
I was thinking about you this morning, like, well, CJ's been away from home and Ben for like a long time. Like, how are you feeling about that? That's hard. And you're also kind of living out of a suitcase, which in itself is like one thing. Yeah. And then to be out, you know, this is a big stretch for you.
Yeah.
So when you say like bringing something with you, I'll reference that a few times people have kind of given me the analogy or the visual of, you know, surround yourself with a bubble. Like imagine a bubble around you, or like a shield of white light, or whatever it is, so that you're not having other people penetrate that. And for me, the idea of that's really fun. It's very hard to do. Even if I go to Superstore, you know, I remember going, and I was postpartum, I remember going to Superstore for maybe the first time and just feeling lost and sweaty and like confused, and I'm out here, why am I here? All these people are here, what's going on? So I'm not great at taking that with me.
Yeah. And I mean, again, for me, my faith is super important. And so I feel like that is the inner peace that I get, and that I bring with me, which I'm...
Do you mean inner peace or inner peace? Like calmness?
Yeah.
Or like the peace that... I'm
like the peace of God. I got the Holy Spirit inside
like I was
of
like,
me.
are you saying like this is the piece of the puzzle that you need, or is this like God's inner peace?
God's inner peace.
Got it.
I was just trying to clarify. I'm like, wait.
No, that's a good question.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So which I love that. And so is there something you say to yourself, or is it just like something
Lord,
you just like,
bring on the peace.
Lord, wash
Jesus,
the peace
help
over me.
Jesus, help me.
Take the wheel.
I mean, I think for me, it's being in prayer and conversation, you know, throughout the day. I mean, I read scripture, right? Like I read the Bible, which brings me a lot of peace. I think just being in relationship and understanding, you know, that my maker's got me no matter where I am on the planet, right? And that's where I always circle back to. But there's obviously like physical and tangible people and things that I also, you know, use as tools in my tool belt.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I can speak to, again, like CJ now has brought Ben out with her when she comes to see us, or work, whatever you want to say, twice now. And I think this last time, because I think was like, I'll bring Ben for Christmas. And it was just a week. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then I think I was the one this time who was like, do you want to bring Ben? Because you're just like a better I don't want to be like a better person, but I'm like, I can tell it's better for you when he's around.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can see this, right? So this is like, I feel like my job as a business partner and a best friend is to acknowledge that and be like, how do we make that happen so that your time here, especially this stint being 3 weeks, is a long time. So it's like, how do we like ease that burden, which you're probably feeling, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because you obviously both got diagnosed before you were with your partners. What did that look like entering into a relationship? Like physically, like what does it look like when someone has anxiety and they're entering into a new relationship? And then how did those conversations go where you were like, P.S. like I might wake up screaming, or P.S. these little pills I take, you know, and
we should have them on.
Oh,
I'm like, I would love to
I've had to have,
I don't know.
and maybe someday we'll divulge into my stuff, but I'm like, I've had to have some conversations with relationships where I'm like, P.S. I I'm kind of broken, right? Like you have to have those like, let me bring you in so you're not like, what's going on? And so I'm curious what that looked like for you guys in your relationships.
Oh gosh, like I feel like I don't even remember.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, I think, okay, multiple things come through my mind. Number one, Ben and I met when we were really young. So I was like 10 and he was like 12. So we lived in separate areas of the city. We grew up in Calgary, but we met at a Bible camp in the summer. And so we had like friends and would stay connected. So I'm like, he's seen me on my journey of some of this stuff, even if it wasn't up close, or before I was diagnosed, but from afar, you know? So that I think is a factor for me in my relationship. B, me and my husband have been so completely transparent and upfront since the beginning. Like we have been, quote unquote, I'm going to say fully nude in front of each other, you know, but like, but emotionally, you know, I'm just like, I was like, this is not going to work. I'm not going to hide anything from you. I'm like, this is me. This is my crazy. This is who I am. You either love it or hate it. Right. And my husband is so patient and so loyal and so loving that he was just like, yeah, that's great. Sounds good. You know? And so I'm sure there's days where he rolls his eyes and he's like, okay, CJ, like you're a lot to handle today. Like our first year of marriage, right? When my parents got divorced, I cried every day for our first year of marriage, you know, and I had quite a few panic attacks and I had lots of anxiety. And I'm sure he was like, what did I sign up for? Like, this is,
he's like,
emotional
what
burden.
Is the return period on this,
you know?
I'm kidding.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I'm like, we made it through such a hardship so early on in our marriage. I would say that like everything else has felt doable for us because I'm like, we just had to band together and figure it out. You know, it was just the two of us. So I don't know. For me, he's always been supportive. He's never been like, he's like, what do you need? Go for it. You want medication? Great. You want to come off medication? Great. My husband is so supportive. Like anything, you know, I'm like, I want to go to Saskatchewan. He's like, great. For how long? You need me? You don't need me? Whatever. Do it. Go for it.
Yeah. He's easy peasy, I feel. Like, I mean, he's got his own stuff. We all have our own stuff. No, I'm not trying to be like, Ben has his own. I'm just mean like, we all have our own stuff going on, but Ben is such a like, yeah, great. I'm like, can you watch all three of my kids while I go do this and then also make me dinner? And he's like, yeah, great. What do you want for supper?
What do you want for dinner?
What do you want for dinner?
Are we
you
doing
want me to
fancy
go
dinner?
make you something that I've never made before? Sounds good. Make you bread every day?
Great.
Sure.
Focaccia. Here you go. Yep.
And I'm just like,
He's
I'm
making
actually,
focaccia
do you want to know what's funny? I'm actually like, do you want to bring Ben?
I know. It's helpful to all of us.
No, he's very, it's
100%.
he's very, and,
That's awesome.
you know, very.
I need to meet Ben.
Ben, we love, and even like I know, so
amazing.
CJ comes and spends time with us, and you know, I love when Ben comes too for my own husband's sake, because then us women, as we're clucking around, I'm sure they're like,
okay,
our wives. What did they say? We came home the one day, and Nate and Theo, I think B was at a play date, so it was literally all the boys, and Nate's like, the women are home. And so now my son, when we come home, he'll be like, the women are home.
He like yells it too, like down the hall.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, sorry. So
Anyways.
like, what was it like with you and Andrew?
Yeah, like I just can't even remember, honestly, even having those conversations. Like, I think when I met him, I wasn't on it, on medication, but yeah, like,
But you'd already been diagnosed.
oh yeah, and I had gone off medication, so I'd been on medication for quite a while, and before I met him, I had weaned off. So from what I remember, it was more a conversation about postpartum, and him and my sister had kind of, and my best friend had like a conversation about, you know, what could happen postpartum, what we need to look out for Megan. Like, let's be in conversation. Let's make sure that she, you know, feels comfortable talking about it. You know, it was, I don't want to say like people were worried, but it was like it was a thing that like this could really rear its head again. And postpartum is wild, and, you know, kind of what's a contingency plan. And so got to the point where I think he came home from work one day and I was just bawling, and I was just like, I got to call the doctor, you know? And so.
Well, no, and I was going to say, I'm interrupting here. And again, just tell me if you want me to edit this question out. But obviously we know, like I asked CJ and she said, well, Ben and I like grew up together. We knew each other, but you and Andrew had an interesting start to your relationship, right?
Yeah.
So I, like, again, I'm like, for our you don't have to share, but I'm like, for our listeners to understand the context of you were diagnosed, but he didn't really see, but then we're right away talking about postpartum.
Okay,
I'm like,
true.
Let's connect the dots a little bit if you're comfortable doing so.
Yeah, I'll give a quick little overview. Andrew and I met and we're seeing each other for 9 months ish, and I got pregnant.
Yeah.
And so we moved in together in August, and Asher was born in October.
Yeah.
So we had it's
like in my head, I'm not surprised that you didn't talk about it when it's such a
and I can't remember because we talk about it's like part of our everyday conversation at this point. But we had a very non-traditional start to our relationship. We were throwing a lot of curveballs at the beginning. First couple years were really tough. We obviously had a baby. That is wild. We're still getting to know each other.
Yes.
Really. We, lost his dad. This is all within the first year of Asher's life. So we navigated a lot. And so there was a lot of stressors and obviously things that would cause anxiety on top of me being postpartum.
Yeah.
And trying to navigate that. And we're trying to navigate this newer relationship that we now have this newborn baby and what the heck is going on. So I think that now, and I mean, Asher's 6, this is, I've known Andrew for almost 8 years. It's a very common conversation for us. And I think it took us a while to get there.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, there's layers and layers of it, but anxiety can be a roller coaster. And when someone else, I can imagine, because when you enter a relationship with somebody who has anxiety, you might have an idea about it.
Yeah.
And it's gonna change, and different circumstances, different triggers, different life, happenings can really change it.
It's not a straight line.
It's not a straight
absolutely
line.
a zigzagging skadoodling mess.
Skadoodling. Anxiety is skadoodling. So it's very I guess I don't want to speak for him and his experience of it, but what I will say is he's extremely supportive. I feel like he's always 1 or 2 steps ahead of it. He can see it coming, and so he'll kind of step in and be like, what do you need? Or encourage me to why don't you, let's get some fresh air. And he does it in these ways that is not very Megan, I can tell that you're feeling anxious, and I think
not
you need
condescending.
to do not at all. He's very how can we get ahead of it? And very smooth in the delivery, if I will say. But if I'm in the throes of a panic attack, he's right there with me. What do you need? Do you need me to hold you tight? Do you need a weighted blanket? What is it that you need? And so he's very, very supportive and really helps me manage and walks through it with me.
How does someone support someone with anxiety? What are the tools that you think? Because obviously, I think your anxiety is your own, but when you're in a relationship, I would venture to say, just if someone's ill, it becomes a part of your spouse's journey as well. So what would be your advice to someone who's listening, who's I don't have anxiety, but my husband does, or my girlfriend does, or my whatever does, what would be your advice on how to best support someone going through that journey?
I think the first question that you can ask is what can I do for you right now? Or what do you need right now? Mm-hmm. Because when you're in the middle of anxiety, from my personal experience anyways, you can see what's right in front of you maybe, but you can't see anything else.
Correct.
You can feel what you're feeling in your body, but you cannot compute feeling something else. So it's what you need in that moment, which might be different the next moment, which might be different the next moment. And it might be different the next time that this happens. So really that also just kind of helps me to focus, and and what do I need right now? And that, it could be, I need to sit on the floor. I need a glass of water. I need whatever. And it could be, I need to be alone. And you need to accept that. You cannot fix it. You can support them through it, but you cannot fix it.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think you touched on it, but I'm it's unique to every person and every situation. So I think I can speak to what's helpful for me and maybe helpful for someone else. But I think first and foremost, have a conversation with each other. Let's be open about it. Let's talk about it. Hey, this is what I'm feeling inside. I think so often we think we know what's going on in someone else's mind or body, or we have expectations or assumptions, vice versa of each other. And I'm let's have a conversation about what it's actually like for you, what you're actually feeling in this moment. But when, same as you, I'm actually feeling very heightened anxiety or panic, I can only concentrate on the here and now. So people often come in and they're like, it's going to be okay. Let's solve a problem. Let's do this. And I'm like, I literally am on a cliff. I need to like walk down this hill and like come, like my body is like at a peak, right? My cortisol is so high, my adrenaline. I'm like, I need to ground myself and bring myself down to a calm state, and then I can have a logical conversation. So I'm like, there's no logic for me when I'm in an anxiety induced state or like a panicky state. I'm like, I physically need to bring my body down. So for me, you know, like most people, maybe it's, you know, like a weighted blanket, it's a hug. You know, sometimes I'm like to my husband, I'm like, get on top of me. I'm like, I just need to like physically feel your weight, right? I always say like, I need personally, I need affirmation. So I'm like, no logic, but I'm like, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm not going anywhere. You're safe.
Reassurance.
You're okay. And in a calm state. And I'm like, just literally, like if you just say I love you over and over and over and over again, I'm like, that's great for me. Right. And then once I've calmed down, I can be like, okay, now I need some time alone. I'm always open personally to circling back and talking about it, but I have to bring myself down. So I would say if you're in that anxiety state, you need some tools and for your partner to identify, because I know I've spoken with people who have viewed in my family my anxiety from the outside, and they're like, I don't know if this is the politically correct way to say it, but it feels scary because you're like, this person, like it feels like, is there something uncontrollable going on with CJ right now? And they're like, how do I help her? Like, what is she gonna, you know, combust or explode or have a heart attack, or, you know, is something like wild going on here physically? And so you almost have to, outside of an anxious state, if they've witnessed you for the first time, walk them through that and be like, hey, when that was happening, I'm still full in control of myself and my body, but I am so heightened that I just like logic does no reason. Like, if that makes, like, I am safe personally so far, in my experience, but I think it's important to like talk it through, because I think if they've never experienced it before, it's something new that they might need some information on.
And I love that you said there's no logic, because there isn't. And even if you can't rationalize it, and even if you're in your brain, and me personally, I'm in my brain being like, I know this isn't true, or I know what to do, but knowing something and then being actually able to do it. Because the one other thing that I think I've learned over the past couple of years, especially, is the toll that anxiety takes on your body physically. Your nervous system becomes dysregulated, and to recover from that isn't instant. It can take me a week to recover from
health issues later in life.
Yeah. and it manifests in different ways, right? So I think a misconception about anxiety for people who don't experience it could be that it's like all mental and emotional, but so much of it is physical.
So much of it is physical.
So would you guys be able to identify just personally on your own, like what specific triggers are for you? Like, I know with CJ, I know a couple of them just because we've
let's
chatted.
talk about them.
Well, I know CJ, maybe this isn't a trigger for anxiety, but I know CJ doesn't do well when she doesn't have sleeps.
Sleeps.
Yes,
CJ needs to sleep.
If she doesn't, this is why it's very funny to me, because I like reflect on our relationship, and CJ will always be like, how did you sleep? And I'm like, I don't remember the last time Nick was like, how did you sleep? And he's like, I know you didn't sleep because you're up all the time. But CJ, so now I've started to be like, how did you sleep, to CJ? Because I'm like, this is like very important for her and how she functions. So I'm curious on what you two find.
That's
would
so
be like,
funny, because you're always like, fine, I slept fine. And I'm like, okay,
Sleep is king, though. Agreed.
In our world.
Queen.
100%.
Yeah, sleep is queen.
Yeah. So what other triggers do you think would be? Hey friends, Erica here to tell you about an upcoming event that I am so excited to attend. The second annual Heart's Desire Gala is happening this October and is one of my favorite events to support. There is a amazing lineup for keynote speakers, you guys. I cannot wait to hear them. We have Christine Marie from Oasis Boutique. You may remember her from actually being on our podcast. Alicia McCarville and Sarah Landry, aka the Bird's Papaya. Like, are you joking? I'm so pumped. The Heart's Desire Gala raises funds for the Little Wonders Family Program, which is based right here in Saskatoon. The Little Wonders Family Program supports families with small children that are facing medical battles. And you guys, this program and its founder, Jen, are incredible. We just spent the weekend with her, and she is just such a light. Okay, so if you're hearing this and you're like, how do I get involved? Turn it up. There are multiple sponsorship levels for this gala, you guys. So there's so many opportunities to make a difference for the Little Wonders families. For more information on how you can become a sponsor, you can connect directly with Jen from Little Wonders on social, which is at Little Wonders Family Program. And to find out more about the work Jen does, visit littlewonders-sask.ca. We cannot wait to see you there.
I mean, sleep for me, like eating well, right? Like protein, right? Like those sorts of sources, like if I'm hungry, or, you know, so like blood sugar spikes, right? Like those types of things aren't great. Like sensory.
I was going to say, like, are there situational things that you're like, going into that will absolutely induce an anxiety attack, will absolutely trigger my anxiety to be more heightened? Or are you like, it's out of left field for me?
When I was younger, it used to be, and this is probably like gives some insight into why I don't do certain things. I still don't like calling to order food. Like I will make Andrew call. I don't like being on the phone. I'd much rather be face to face or texting with somebody. And I don't know where that started from, but having to do things for the first time can be hard. Some are really easy, but if it's like, if I'm out of my comfort zone, that's kind of a trigger. Overstimulation, big crowds of people, and a lot of noise now. Years ago, that didn't really bother me, but now it does. Overwhelm, too many tasks, not eating, not having enough water, not having enough sleep. New environments, it depends. It depends. If I'm alone, I used to also, like, if I was meeting my friends out for dinner, I needed to know exactly where they were sitting. So I was not walking in a room and having to look around. That for me was huge.
Yeah. That's very stressful.
I would put myself out of the way to go with somebody else so that I didn't have to walk in somewhere alone.
Yeah. No, sensory is a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
So it can be like sound, sight, too many people. Situational. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's hard to say everything brings me anxiety.
I get it though. I get what you're saying.
But, you know, I'm like everything and nothing, you know, so I'm like everything to some extent, like, is just low lying, like it's there.
Yeah.
But as you get older, you have tools and you can recognize, okay, these are things that I can walk through. And
this isn't my favorite, but I'll do it.
I'd be interested for you, because you haven't done this, but you've cut caffeine out of your diet.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, Megan,
I literally couldn't.
No, you couldn't.
It was so
I'm like curious actually on you, because I'm like, I have another person in my life who has anxiety, and she was like, I had to stop drinking coffee because it just like was way too much.
Cortisol, right? So
yeah.
Adrenaline.
Yeah. It's funny because I was actually thinking about that this morning. So over the holidays, I had the flu. And right before that, I was like, I need to cut down on the coffee because holiday season is hectic.
You have like 10 cups of coffee in a day, and then you're like,
that's exaggerating.
No, I meant like, no. I meant like, I am like at my in-laws. Like I'm like,
I see what you're
you
saying.
as like a people. Like I'm like, all of a sudden the coffee's
There's-
just on all day, and you're like, I'm playing a board game and I've had 7 cups of coffee, and you're like, oh my gosh, I need some turkey. Like,
does anybody have water?
Yeah, you're like, no, never mind.
Our
I'll just have
hands
some
are
pot of
shaking.
gold.
Yeah.
Never mind the food. I'll have a pot of gold and
There's
some
just
turtles and call it a day.
Cheap
Like,
chocolates.
Then we
Yes.
get the sugar spikes.
right? So I'm
Totally.
like, like this is for me. I'm like not saying you. I'm saying like socially,
Everyone.
we're all
Yes.
just like
It
hopping
goes-
up on hot chocolate and coffee.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand, I think,
Yeah.
with that kind of stuff. But for me, coffee is a habit, and like I didn't drink coffee, while I was pregnant, no problem. But like I probably had one the day after Asher was born. Like it's just routine for me, kind of. And I had the flu. Right before then, I was like, I need to cut back on the coffee. And then I got the flu, so careful what you wish for. But I couldn't even look at coffee for like a week. Like I didn't have any coffee. And then we know I like my iced coffee. It was then I tried to drink up hot coffee, and I was like, this is disgusting. So I started with a little coffee, but I kind of in retrospect, I'm like, why didn't I just like kick it
Get on
then?
that
Because
train.
now I'm back on it, and now I'm like, yesterday I had too much coffee. And then I went home and I was like, I'm feeling anxious. I'm probably hungry. And then, but now that you say it, it's like, yeah, I had too much coffee, and then I had a Diet Coke. Like, what is my problem?
Like literally, if I have a speck of coffee now, I'm like up till 3 or 4 a.m. like
Really?
a drop.
How long has it been since you cut it out?
Oh, you guys, I'm so bad at timelines.
Like, for sure
we're
a year.
For sure over a year. I would say a year and a half, going on 2 years. I started, I mean, again, it just like, I realized, okay, like what things cause me to have adrenaline spikes or like cortisol spikes, and what can be controlled, right? So when you're doing exercise in a workout, your adrenaline, your cortisol is going out, but it's like releasing those other hormones, right? Like the dopamine, and you're like having like getting all those good hormones from it, right? But I'm like, when I'm drinking coffee, like I'm having this crash and this spike and just feeling these anxious feelings. So for me, I was like, okay, I think I need to cut back. So I first started and I swapped to decaf because I was like, it's just the taste now. I was like, I'm going to start with not just, you know, I need to wake up, but it was like a lot of people will say it's the routine. So for the routine, I just switched to decaf. And then slowly I switched to black tea, which is interesting in hindsight because I'm like, that actually still has quite a bit of caffeine, but it's less of a spike, I believe. It's like more, you know, on a longer scale, so it doesn't give you quite that spike.
Slow release caffeine.
Yes. Yeah. And then now, and then I just slowly started like spreading that out, and now I don't miss it. And I've swapped to tea in the morning, and everyone's going to think I'm weird unless you're fun like me, and I drink dandelion tea with a little bit of some dairy-free milk in it.
Sounds spring-like.
And I'm saying it quietly. Yep, that's what I do.
That just sounds so gross.
And I'm like, let's wear flower crowns and drink dandelion tea.
I just like love it. I like love it and crave it.
Like?
It tastes like like slightly
Dirty
like
weeds.
bitter. Like it's got like a hint of bitter, but it's like, it's got a coffee like taste, and everyone's going to be like, it doesn't taste like coffee. And I'm like, I understand, like if you drink coffee and you love coffee, it's not the same as coffee, but it has like that dark feel to it. And then if you put like a little bit of milk in it,
It's like when people try to tell me that spaghetti squash is spaghetti. I'm like, it's not.
It's not, but it's still delicious.
I'm like, you can love spaghetti squash, but don't come at me telling me it's spaghetti. I'm like,
not
it's
the
not
same.
pasta.
yes,
not the same.
exactly.
Interesting. So my question is then, we'll end with this one here. What advice can you give to someone who either is like listening to this and is like, your girl, you know, I might be experiencing some anxiety, or someone who's just recently gotten a diagnosis? I'd love to hear like a couple tips or any words of wisdom that you can provide to someone who's kind of in the starting stages of figuring out what works for them.
Well, so what I would say to somebody who's wondering if maybe, you know, or relating to some of this and thinking maybe they have some anxiety is talk to your doctor.
Yes.
First,
There's to a health professional.
There's so many options. If you're hesitant on medication, there's so many options that don't involve medication. I look at medication as one of many tools that I use. I'm not reliant on it. It supports me, and it supports me well. And also, to the medication note, I will say it's okay if you need to adjust your medication depending on what's going on in your life or what you're managing or what you're navigating. I just recently increased my dosage because I was like trying to manage it with all of my tools, and I got to the place where it just wasn't working. And so I went to my doctor, had a conversation, we made a plan. And again, he also said to me, doctor's orders, you need time off, you need to rest, you know, take those things seriously. Your body can only do so much. And figure out, you know, it's going to be trial and error to figure out what works for you. But, you know, start with some of the things that maybe are common that people say work for them. Like CJ and I both agree on like a weighted blanket, rest, maybe a quiet room, maybe go for a walk, eat some protein, have some water. And the trick I've found is not getting complacent. So those kind of things actually need to be built into a routine to best support you.
Great. I literally second everything that she said. I referred to a book on my own podcast that really helped me in just like helping. If you like reading, and if you like, you know, some exercises and tools, and you're like, I can't access a counselor yet, these are like some things that you can maybe like go through with a friend or a family member. And I went and looked it up, and it's When Panic Attacks, by Dr. David Burns, I believe. So that's like a resource that I found really helpful for myself. But I would say, start the conversation, reach out to someone. There's always someone out there who loves you and cares for you and wants to help you. talk to your doctor, do all of, I don't have anything extra to add. I'm like, it's unique to each person in some sense, right? Because I'm like, we all have things that we like to do,
I'll also add, like, anxiety is something that you feel. Anxiety is a feeling. It is not who you are. It's something that can be managed, and every person is unique, but there is no shame around it. Every person is unique. Everybody's brain is unique. Everybody's emotions are unique. And like CJ said, there are so many people who have great supports, and everybody wants you to live your life happy. So, talking to the people in your life that can support you and help you figure out how to best live your best quality of life is
and like
awesome.
My doctor said to me, right? He was like, this is not quality of life.
Yes.
What I was living before I was diagnosed with it. And for me, started to gather tools. So if you're feeling like this is not a quality of life that you want to, you're not happy with the quality of life that you're living, like reach out to some of those people and start that conversation so that you can get the help that you need to feel better. Because I think Megan and I can say there is light on the other side.
Yes.
And there are dark days and there are storms, but there absolutely is light and hope for those that are diagnosed with mental health disorders and or anxiety specifically.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm really glad you guys were so open today and so vulnerable.
You're
Next
welcome.
time on Erica Talk. No, I'm just kidding. Next time
Erica's
on
Corner.
What are our feelings? Yeah. Erica's Corner. No, I'm glad you guys were open with me. Like I said, I can obviously speak to feeling anxiety, but I'm like, I don't really live with it on a day-to-day. And I think we have a lot of people listening who are going to either identify or be
But maybe we should ask you, a hot seat question too. Because you've now identified that you don't identify with having anxiety, but that you've felt anxiety before. And so I'm curious if you're open to share, what are some situations or circumstances where you felt anxiety? How did that feel? And have you found tools that have helped you manage through that emotion for you?
I would say that as someone who has experienced it, right, it's usually walking into situations actually like with people I know I don't feel safe with. Like I can walk into, I'm not like you guys are like, I don't want to walk into a room not knowing people. And I'm like, whatever, like I'm cool. Like I'll go in and be like, hey, I'll make a friend somewhere. It's really walking into rooms with people I don't feel safe with that will cause me to feel anxious because I am like how do I prep myself? How do I make myself ready for any situation so that I feel like ready to go? So when I don't feel ready to go, I think that induces some feelings of anxiety, right?
I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said feeling unsafe. And I thought about that when you were speaking about when we're walking into a situation, like how can I walk into something with tools? I think it all comes back to feeling safe in yourself, in a situation, in the environment. And I think you hit that right on the head.
Which I think is interesting because I never ever want to minimize anxiety for people. I never want to minimize that. But I'm interested in the last 2 years how many people experienced anxiety versus how many people were diagnosed with anxiety. Because I do think there's a difference. Yep. And I think the last 2 years caused a lot of people to experience anxiety. And I don't know how anxiety works. Can you experience anxiety and then therefore the rest of your life, I have no idea how that works. I would feel that. And that's why I was very careful over the last little while to say I experience anxiety because I don't want to minimize someone who has it on a day-to-day because I don't understand what that's like. But I also can acknowledge that, yes, I've experienced this.
100%.
So I'm curious on the last 2 years how many people went to their doctor during a state of anxiety in our world and have now been diagnosed, put on medication who maybe either didn't need to be or how many people need to be and aren't. These are just the things I think about.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
One swing of the pendulum on one side to the other.
People who... Because it was a very anxious time. I think we went through people feeling very unsafe.
Fearful.
No matter what side you're on of all of the arguments over the last 2 years, both sides came from a place of fear.
Yes.
And so I'm curious about that.
Right? And I think anytime you have something traumatic that happens in your life, like there's going to be repercussions, anxiety, depression, all of these, the gamut of things that can come up for us, PTSD, that's whatever, same thing. But I'm like, I agree with you, Eric. I'm very curious.
Yeah.
That's a great.
Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say about myself, which Leah Tyree brought up on our ADHD thing, and I'm in the process of a diagnosis with ADHD, is that ADHD and anxiety can look very similar. So that's interesting to me as I'll go through my process of what I need in tools, right? Like what that, because they say it can look
very similar.
It can look very similar.
Yeah.
Which I think when I hear about like the sensory overload, I'm like, oh yeah, your girl is like, oh, okay, like this is too much and I need to like recoup. But again, I wouldn't consider it anxiety. I would consider it like, oh, that was like a lot on my brain and my brain is tired and whatever.
And I think it's interesting the language that you used with I've experienced it, because I often go back to like language is so powerful, and I think unconsciously I say I manage anxiety because I don't. When I say I have anxiety, to me that feels like I'm saying I am anxiety, right? So when saying like I manage anxiety, that is part of what I do in a day, you know?
Yeah. Lots of good points and conversations. Again, I know we were saying it before, but I'm really glad you guys were open and honest with me today. And we'd love to hear from our audience.
Yes.
You know, if you experience anxiety, what are some tools? Like, did you hear anything today that resonates with you? Or are you sitting here being like, oh my gosh, CJ and Megan need to try this? Like, send us a DM. Let us know. We love to hear from you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. We would love to hear from you.
All right.
Great.
Thanks.
Till next time.
Peace.
Bye. Thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.
Bye.
Bye. Adios.